Ignacio, you've been advocating for this for a long time, kind of thing, and I know that you have seen mixed populations as well. It's not only with migrants but with the refugees, asylum seekers. So the scope of your work in terms is tremendous in terms of the different populations you've kind of looked at as well. And from your members on the ground, groups that groups that respond to this situation, what are you hearing? What are you hearing? And what do you think in the building back better should be our focus? Ignacio.
Thank you, William, and really appreciated also Patrick's intervention. And then, William, you come with many questions, and I know, as you said, we have 3 slots. So I'm only going to tackle a few of the questions because you have really many, and it's with humility that we have to address the questions. I would first say the overall, to respond directly to your question, what we're hearing from members, what we are seeing, what we are living. Major concerns, of course, on how the legal obligations related to access to protection under humanitarian, under international human rights and refugee law, and also as well as practices, are a major concern, are being challenged. The risks of reducing the beneficial impact of migration is clearly there, and there's evidence out there. There are, of course, good examples, and if we have time, we can cover some around how some countries are reacting. But overall, we know it's a huge concern out there. What I would like to do first, in my first round, if you may, William, is to go back a little bit to 2018 and to remind ourselves what have states committed to in the Objective 7 of the GCM. Then I would certainly want to develop, and perhaps that's for the next round of inputs and linking to the conversations and what other speakers are going to bring, is to talk around 3 crises. And I think Patrick certainly covered a lot around the health crisis. We have the socio-economic crisis. And then linked directly to Objective 7 is the protection crisis. And that's why I think it's worth going back. What do we have in the Objective 7? And then afterwards, certainly I have elements of reflections of way forwards. Where is the hope? Of course, there is always hope. And 4 things that may configure or help design the building back better, which I hope I would have time to share. So now if we go back to 2018 and to what we do have on an intergovernmentally negotiated and agreed outcome, Objective 7, to address and reduce the vulnerabilities in migration. A few points. One is how civil society organizations, but of course not only, really pushed for it to finish where we have 12 points of action. I remember with the draft 0, it was 7, and it was pushed to have 12 points of action. We have to anchor discussions on those 12 points of action in different conversations, including at the national level. And the way it is organized, it was more specific for state commitments to be clearly laid out and the actions to be taken. I would like to come back to a few reflections also linking to what you said in the introduction, William, around vulnerability. And what we have there is that we have a kind of open-ended, we don't have an open-ended description of vulnerabilities in there. And that is a bit of a problem. But at the same time, and very important for the state interventions, the Objective 7 does cover a great amount of vulnerabilities. It could have gone a bit further, but it includes also the vulnerabilities created by state authorities themselves. Um, I'm sure Irene, because we worked on this together, would really be covering a lot around children and women, which in the zero draft actually were almost the two key vulnerable groups that were mentioned. And it's as time went on in the negotiations that it was something more comprehensive. Now, there is the recognition that migrants face multiple forms of vulnerability. That's something that we've really discussed within the GCM on this objective 7. So, and it does place human rights at the center of states' action. I know even if we see it seems not to always be followed at the moment, it's really good to remind what we have grounded in some texts and continuously go back to it. Another very positive element that we have there that I think is very, very relevant to our situation now is the acknowledgement that there are legal and practical impediments within destination states. So that's linked to work abuse and to irregular migration. So having laid down a few of the elements of the achievements that we have, certainly I concur with William and Patrick, of course, on how we are very much being challenged, on how there are new vulnerabilities, on how the group of vulnerable people is just increasing. Vulnerable situations are just becoming even more vulnerable. And this is true, particularly, of course, for migrants such as the ones in irregular situations, migrant workers with precarious livelihoods, or people working in the informal economy, victims of trafficking. We certainly hear also from the humanitarian context the increase of situations of gender-based violence on vulnerable groups. Internally displaced people and asylum seekers, even if this is mainly covered by the Global Compact on refugees, certainly enters into the discussion when you're working on operations in the different contexts that we see. I'll stop here then, William, for the 6 minutes, and I know that you invite me again on 2 opportunities. One, to talk a bit further on how I perceive the protection crisis, and really to identify it as a crisis in itself, and that really links strongly to our advocacy work on Objective 7. And then also I have 4 things to indicate where hope is and where we should be working.
Thank you. And I will come back to you on the protection crisis. I think that is going to be crucial to the discussion in put, like we heard in one of the previous webinars, that protection should not be something that is a reaction to a situation, but protection should be inbuilt into the building back program kind of thing. So it would be really good to hear your ideas on that. And hope, you have always given hope. So I'll come back to you on that point as well to see where. But Patrick, I'll come back to you to ask you to think a little more deeper in terms of when you're looking at which countries or where it has been useful to look at some examples. If you could identify countries in the region of Africa, Asia, or the Middle East, that would be fantastic, or even Latin America. But